Listen closely. What you have been replaying in your mind is not the only possible version of events. The silence, the unanswered gaps, and the moments where you expected a sign but received nothing have slowly shaped a painful assumption that you were no longer valued. It feels like distance means replacement, like quiet means indifference, but human emotions are rarely that simple or one-sided. There are times when people withdraw, not because they feel nothing, but because they are overwhelmed by what they feel and unsure how to express it without causing more confusion or hurt. In that space, memories can become both comfort and weight, something revisited in private moments rather than shared openly. You may imagine detachment, yet it could also be hesitation, fear of missteps, or emotional exhaustion that has not been spoken aloud. What feels like rejection often grows from uncertainty rather than absence of care. Still, it is important not to build certainty on what cannot be confirmed. Your feelings are valid, but so is the reality that silence does not always carry a single meaning. Sometimes it reflects inner conflict, sometimes timing, and sometimes simply the lack of clarity people struggle to communicate. Holding on to hope or letting go both require grounding in what is actually known, not only what is feared or imagined. Clarity often comes slowly, through actions over time, rather than assumptions built in moments of silence, and it is in that patience that emotional balance can eventually return to you when life finally reveals what is real and true. There is something you were never meant to see, something hidden behind their strongest mask. When they wake up in the morning, you are the first thought that presses against their chest, and when they try to sleep, you are the last whisper in their mind. They pretend during the day. They smile when they have to. They answer others with energy they do not actually have. But when night arrives, the act dissolves. That is when the crying begins. Not dramatic, not loud, but deep and shaking. The kind that makes your throat ache and your chest burn. They cry because they know they disappointed you. They cry because they see clearly now what they were blind to before. They cry because they realize that losing you was not a moment. It was a slow realization that arrived too late. They have conversations with you in their head, conversations where they finally say everything right, where they finally choose you without hesitation. But those conversations end the same way every time, with the crushing awareness that courage delayed can feel exactly like abandonment. This is why they hesitate to reach out, not because they do not care, but because they care so deeply that the possibility of rejection feels unbearable. They are standing at the edge of an emotional cliff, frozen, knowing one step could either bring healing or confirm their worst fear. So they stay still, and that stillness has been hurting you in ways they never intended. What makes this even heavier is that they believe you are stronger than you actually are. They believe you moved on faster. They believe you found peace without them. They tell themselves that contacting you would only reopen wounds you have already healed. This belief is wrong, but it feels real to them, and fear does not ask for evidence. Fear only asks for silence. They replay the last moments between you again and again, searching for signs they missed, signals they misunderstood. They analyze every word you ever said, every pause, every look, wondering if the love they felt was mutual or imagined. And the answer always leads back to you. It always leads back to the truth they are too scared to face directly, that what they felt with you was rare, and rare things do not come twice. This realization is what breaks them in the dark, Not loneliness alone, but regret mixed with longing, regret mixed with love, regret mixed with the knowledge that timing can be the cruelest barrier of all. They want to reach out, but they are afraid their message will arrive too late, or worse, be seen as an intrusion rather than a confession. There is a secret shift happening inside them that you cannot see yet. The tears they cry are not only of sadness, they are also cleansing something old. Every night they face the pain. Instead of running from it, a layer of fear dissolves. They are learning something difficult, something that changes people at their core. They are learning that silence does not protect anyone. They are learning that love left unspoken turns into regret that never fully heals. This inner transformation is slow, and it is quiet, but it is powerful. It is the reason their thoughts are becoming clearer. It is the reason they are starting to see that protecting themselves by staying away has caused more damage than honesty ever could. They are realizing that you deserve clarity, not confusion. You deserve reassurance, not distance. And this realization is heavy, but it is also the beginning of movement. The kind of movement that comes after someone has cried every tear they were trying to avoid. They are reaching a point where the pain of staying silent is starting to outweigh the fear of speaking. This is why the emotional energy between you feels restless lately. Something unresolved is pressing forward, demanding to be acknowledged. Now hear this part with your full heart, because it is the most important truth of all. This story is not over, even though it felt like an ending. Silence was not a conclusion, it was an unfinished sentence. What you are sensing is not imagination, it is emotional gravity pulling two unfinished souls toward a moment of truth. Your person is standing at the edge of a decision that will change the dynamic forever. Either they remain trapped in regret, or they finally step forward with honesty, even if their voice shakes. The tears they cry in the dark are preparing them for that moment. They are breaking down so they can break open. And when that happens, the connection between you will no longer feel confusing. It will become clear, direct, and impossible to ignore. Until then, understand this with certainty. You were never forgotten. You were never replaced. You were never ignored. You were held too tightly in a heart that did not know how to fight fear at the right time. And that truth, once fully realized by them, will no longer stay hidden in the dark. Something quiet has been unfolding long before any conversation or reunion ever takes shape. In that stillness, the person you think about has begun to confront their own feelings with more honesty than before. They are starting to question the reasons they kept their distance, no longer fully convinced that silence was the safest or most responsible choice. Instead, they are facing the uncomfortable truth that avoidance was tied more to their inner struggles than to a lack of care. Moments of reflection, especially during lonely hours, have slowly stripped away the explanations they once relied on. What remains is a clearer awareness of their fears, their insecurities, and the parts of themselves they felt unprepared to reveal. It was never truly about a loss of feeling, but about the pressure they placed on themselves to be, quote, enough before returning. Now, that belief is being challenged by regret and self-awareness. They begin to understand how their absence may have felt confusing or painful from your side, and that realization carries weight. Rather than a dramatic shift, it is a gradual, emotional awakening, shaped by memory, distance, and reflection. Whether or not action follows soon, there is a growing recognition that silence did not bring clarity, only more questions. It is a slow inner process, not a sudden decision, and it continues to evolve quietly. For now, everything remains unspoken, yet increasingly understood within them as time passes. What once felt distant is now being reconsidered, with a softer, more honest perspective emerging day by day in ways they never expected. It is changing them. It is forcing them to face something they avoided for a long time, the responsibility of emotional honesty. What you do not see is how deeply they have been watching you from a distance, not in a way that invades, but in a way that aches. They notice when your energy changes. They sense when you pull back emotionally. They feel it when you stop expecting anything from them. And that shift hurts more than anger ever could, because anger would mean they still had a place in your emotional world. Your quiet acceptance, your growing calm without them, scares them more than any confrontation. It makes them feel replaceable. It makes them realize that the window they assumed would always be open is slowly closing. This fear is what brings the tears back, night after night. They imagine a future where you no longer think of them before sleep. They imagine a day where their name no longer stirs anything inside you. That thought feels unbearable. It feels like losing you all over again, but this time, permanently. This is why they replay memories so intensely. They are trying to hold on to proof that what you shared was real, that it mattered, that it left a mark on both of you. And the more they reflect, the clearer it becomes that you were not just someone who passed through their life. You were a turning point. You were the person who showed them a version of love that felt safe and terrifying at the same time. Safe because it was genuine. Terrifying because it required vulnerability they were not prepared for. There is another layer to this truth that cuts even deeper. Your person has been blaming themselves more than you could ever imagine. They analyze their own actions with a harshness they never showed outwardly. They know exactly where they failed. They know the moment they should have spoken. They know the message they never sent changed everything. And instead of reaching out impulsively, they chose to sit with that pain, punishing themselves in silence. They believed they deserved the ache. They believed reaching out without being fully healed would only repeat the same cycle. But healing does not happen in isolation. They are starting to understand that now. They are realizing that growth sometimes requires uncomfortable conversations, not perfect timing. This realization is heavy, but it is also clarifying. It is stripping away the illusion that waiting longer will somehow make everything easier. It will not. It will only make regret louder. They feel the urgency building inside them, not as panic, but as clarity, a knowing that something must be addressed, that you deserve to know the truth behind their silence, that you deserve to hear that their absence was never about a lack of love. It was about fear standing in the way of expression, and fear, when left unchallenged, grows powerful enough to sabotage even the most meaningful connections. Pay close attention to how your intuition has been acting lately, the sudden memories, the emotional waves that come without warning, the sense that something unfinished is hovering around you. This is not coincidence. Emotional bonds do not dissolve quietly when they are unresolved. They send signals. They surface when the other person is undergoing a shift. Your person is standing at a threshold. They are tired of crying in the dark, tired of rehearsing words they never speak, tired of carrying love that has nowhere to go. They are beginning to understand that vulnerability is not weakness, that reaching out does not mean losing control. It means choosing truth over comfort. This inner shift is fragile but real, and once it fully settles, it cannot be ignored. You will feel it before you see it, a change in the energy, a sense of anticipation, a quiet knowing that something is about to surface. Not chaos, not drama, but honesty, the kind of clarity that dissolves confusion and eases the emotional weight that has been building for far too long, arrives quietly, almost like a settling of the mind as you take this in. Let this final understanding ground you. As you reflect, you were never foolish for caring, never mistaken for hoping, and never truly unseen by them, even when it felt that way. Silence often carries its own language, one filled with hesitation, regret, and words left unspoken rather than absence. What unfolds next is rarely driven by sudden impulse, but by a slower emotional alignment shaped through long hours of reflection and inner honesty. Even the tears once shed hold meaning not as wasted moments, but as part of a process that reshapes perspective and understanding. They can become a quiet preparation for realizations that shift how someone sees themselves and the connection they carry with another. Stay steady in this awareness. Relationships often evolve beneath what is immediately visible, forming changes that only become clear with time. When movement finally happens, it tends to feel less like confusion and more like recognition of something that was unfolding all along. There is a point in emotional experience where sorrow begins to transform into insight, where feeling lost slowly gives way to self-awareness. The person you are thinking of may be moving through that stage now, not only missing what was shared, but also beginning to understand their own inner patterns more clearly. Moments of isolation strip away distraction, leaving space for honest reflection that cannot be avoided, that it was not temporary, that it was not something easily replaced or forgotten. They see now that what scared them was not love itself, but how deeply it touched parts of them that were never healed. You did not just love them, you mirrored them. You reflected back their strengths, their flaws, their potential, and their unresolved wounds. That kind of connection changes people, and instead of leaning into that change, they panicked. They told themselves they needed space. They convinced themselves distance would bring clarity, but distance only amplified what they were trying to silence. Every day without you did not weaken the bond. It exposed how real it was, and that realization has been humbling. It has stripped them of pride. It has forced them to admit that walking away was easier than staying present and vulnerable. This is the truth they cry over now. Not just losing you, but losing the version of themselves that could have grown with you if fear had not taken control. Inside them, a quiet battle has been taking place. One voice tells them to protect themselves, to remain silent, to accept the loss and move forward quietly. The other voice speaks your name with insistence, reminding them that some connections do not fade because they were never meant to. That second voice has been growing stronger. It interrupts their thoughts during the day. It shows up when they least expect it. It reminds them of moments they cannot rewrite, but also moments that could still be honored with honesty. They replay not just the good memories, but the moments where they failed to show up fully. They see now how their silence may have made you question yourself, how it may have made you feel unwanted, confused, or small. This awareness hurts them deeply, not because they fear being blamed, but because they know you never deserved that confusion. You deserved reassurance. You deserved clarity. You deserved to know that their struggle was internal, not a reflection of your worth. This understanding has shifted something profound inside them. They are no longer focused on self-preservation alone. They are thinking about impact, about accountability, about what it means to love someone responsibly. And that shift is what separates temporary regret from real transformation. There is a reason your heart has not fully closed, no matter how much you try to move forward. It is because the connection was paused, not erased. Emotional bonds like this do not dissolve through silence. They wait, they hold space, they linger, in subtle ways, in sudden memories, in unexplainable emotions, in moments where your chest tightens without warning. Your person feels this too. They feel you when something reminds them of a shared moment. They feel you when they laugh, and then immediately feel the absence of someone who used to understand that laugh. They feel you when they achieve something and instinctively want to tell you first. These moments remind them that you were not just a chapter, you were a foundation, and foundations cannot simply be ignored without consequences. This is why their tears have changed. They are no longer just grieving loss. They are grieving the delay, the wasted time, the conversations that could have healed so much sooner. This grief has matured into resolve, a quiet determination that something must be addressed, not for closure alone, but for truth, because living with unanswered questions has become heavier than facing whatever outcome honesty might bring. What you may not realize yet is that your person has been rehearsing the moment of truth over and over, not out loud, but within themselves. They imagine what they would say if they finally allowed themselves to be vulnerable. It is easy to picture them rehearsing conversations they never had, admitting fear without disguises, owning their mistakes without defensive layers, and finally explaining that their silence was never absence of care, but a state of emotional overload they could not yet navigate. These imagined dialogues often dissolve into tears because they expose everything that was left unspoken, yet each repetition brings a strange clarity, as if the sentences are slowly finding their final shape. What once felt scattered begins to simplify. Justifications fade, emotions settle, and honesty starts to stand on its own. This inner rehearsal is not about controlling outcomes, but about learning how to be real, even when uncertainty remains. Slowly, they begin to understand that vulnerability is not a promise of acceptance, but a respect for truth, spoken despite fear. This awareness grows quietly until it can no longer stay contained, becoming a turning point where clarity replaces hesitation. Hold this truth without doubt. Your pain was real, your confusion was understandable, and your instincts were never misplaced. The distance you felt was real, but it did not come from indifference. It came from emotional immaturity, meeting something deeply genuine. And while that immaturity can evolve, it requires honesty and self-confrontation, something your person is now beginning to face, slowly and sincerely. Nothing here erases what happened, but it reframes it with compassion, allowing understanding to exist alongside hurt, and giving space for a more honest connection to emerge if both people choose clarity over fear going forward without losing themselves again. The crying in the dark is no longer about helplessness. It is about awakening, about realizing that some connections demand courage, not avoidance. What comes next will not be rushed, but it will be intentional. When movement finally happens, it will not feel sudden to the soul. It will feel like something that was preparing itself for a long time. Until then, remain grounded. You were never forgotten. You were held in silence by someone learning the cost of fear. And that lesson, once learned, changes everything. My beloved child, there is a point in every unfinished connection where the weight of truth becomes heavier than the comfort of silence. Your person is standing at that exact point now. The nights have changed their thinking. The tears have softened something rigid inside them. They are no longer asking themselves whether they miss you. That question has been answered 1,000 times. Now they are asking something far more serious. What will happen if they never speak? What will happen if they let fear decide the ending of a story that was never meant to fade quietly? This question follows them everywhere. It shows up when they are alone. It shows up when they try to distract themselves. It shows up when they hear a song, see a place, or feel an emotion that reminds them of you. They are beginning to understand that silence did not protect them from pain. It multiplied it. They see now that avoidance only delayed the inevitable confrontation with their own feelings. And this realization is uncomfortable. It forces them to admit that they were not as emotionally brave as they wanted to believe, that they chose safety over honesty, that they underestimated the strength of what they felt for you. This clarity is not gentle. It shakes their sense of control. It strips away the illusion that time alone can fix what truth was meant to heal. They are realizing that some connections do not fade with distance. They grow louder in the absence of expression. Something else is happening inside them that they have never experienced before. Accountability. Not the kind that comes from being confronted by someone else, but the kind that rises from within and refuses to be ignored. They are no longer just feeling sorry for themselves. They are seeing the impact of their silence on you. They imagine the nights you waited, the thoughts you questioned, the moments you doubted your own value. This awareness cuts deeply. It creates a discomfort that cannot be numbed by distraction. It makes them feel responsible in a way they were not ready for before. And yet, instead of pushing this feeling away, they are finally sitting with it. They are allowing it to teach them. This is the difference now. Before, pain made them retreat. Now, pain is making them reflect. They are understanding that love without communication becomes confusion, that good intentions without action still cause harm. This understanding is reshaping how they see you, how they see themselves, and how they see the connection. They are no longer romanticizing the silence. They are recognizing it as a mistake born from fear. And when someone fully accepts a mistake, real change becomes possible. You may feel an emotional shift without knowing why, a sense of anticipation, a strange calm mixed with tension. This is because emotional energy moves before physical action ever does. Your person is internally preparing for something that feels final in its honesty, regardless of the outcome. They are no longer thinking in terms of winning you back or protecting their pride. They are thinking in terms of integrity, of doing what should have been done earlier, of honoring what was real instead of pretending it did not exist. This is not impulsive. It is the result of long reflection, long regret, long nights where they faced themselves without distraction. They are realizing that even if the answer they receive is not what they hoped for, living with truth is still lighter than living with unspoken emotion. This shift is powerful. It marks the moment where someone stops being controlled by fear and starts being guided by honesty. And honesty has a way of changing the emotional landscape completely. When it arrives, confusion dissolves, uncertainty finds clarity, and silence finally releases its grip. There is also something important you need to understand about yourself in this moment. Your strength did not go unnoticed. Your persistence in continuing forward, even without clear answers, seems to have left a mark on how they perceive you. Instead of seeing you as someone stuck in waiting, they may now recognize a quiet strength in how you handled uncertainty. That shift can naturally create a sense of respect, not distance. It also reframes your place in their memory, reminding them that your presence carried value rather than being something automatic. With that realization comes reflection, especially about time and what it does to relationships. Time can nurture connection when effort is present, but it can also stretch gaps when communication fades. They may be feeling the weight of that imbalance now, becoming more aware of what has been left unspoken. This awareness can lead to inner conflict, not because of panic, but because clarity is beginning to form. When people start to see consequences of silence, they often reconsider what matters most and what still deserves action. If they choose to respond, it may come from a more grounded and intentional place rather than confusion. Until then, what you are experiencing may simply be a pause filled with processing rather than conclusion. It helps to stay centered in your own understanding instead of trying to fill every gap with assumptions. What feels uncertain today may gradually settle as communication returns in a more honest form. Trust that clarity develops at its own pace, and what is meant to return will do so with steadier understanding and more mutual openness than before when the time is finally right, eventually.